And a good Wednesday to you. Appreciate you joining us as always. Would Jerod Mayo being promoted to head coach be a bad idea by this organization after what we've seen post Brady with Bill Belichick? Would it be a bad idea? I want your thoughts on that. Throw a comment in. Phil Perry earlier this week talked about Jerod Mayo and how it's likely Mayo would be back with this team. And if Mayo comes back, it's most likely as the head coach, not necessarily the defensive coordinator. Would that be a bad idea? Mayo as head coach in 2024. I'm open. I'm open to having Mayo be the guy for this team. As I've said before, I'll say it again. Just get the right guy. Just find the right guy. That's the number one priority. So I'm open to this idea of Mayo staying here in New England, being promoted to head coach, even though he's been here with Belichick, even though he played for Belichick. I understand the concern. I understand this idea that Mayo would be Bill's guy, and hiring Bill's guy as the head coach would be a mistake because A, the Bill Belichick coaching tree, and B, you want to get as far removed from what's happening here the last couple of years as you can. So therefore, just pretty much throw everybody out that's been associated with Belichick. If you are a friend of Belichick, if you've coached with Belichick, if you've played for Belichick, if you've been in the front office with Belichick, get out. Exit stage left. I understand. I understand that concern. I understand how people feel. But here's the question to you. If it didn't end like this for Belichick, if this year wasn't as ugly as it's been, would you feel that way about Jerod Mayo? Would you look at Mayo and say the same things if the Patriots finished at 7-10 and Belichick was relieved of his duties? If they finished 6-11, would you feel differently? Would you say to yourself, well, look, it was a bad last season, but Belichick, for 20 plus years, helped this team win 6 Super Bowls, get to a bunch of them, get to a bunch of AFC championship games. And it's not a bad idea to take the greatest of all time and one of his pupils in Jerod Mayo and elevate that guy to be the head coach. Don't let this season in a vacuum impact your overall thought process regarding Jerod Mayo or any other coach or front office guy. You can't let this season be the harbinger of doom. You've got to look at this and look at it from 30,000 feet and say to yourself, what is the best move? Who is the best guy for the job? So if it didn't end as badly with Belichick as it looks like it's going to end, would you feel differently about Mayo? And if so, doesn't that tell you it's more of a Belichick thing than a Mayo thing? And should it be a Belichick thing more than a Mayo thing for Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft? Or should this be about Jerod Mayo, the individual, and whether or not you believe that he can be the next guy, no matter who was his mentor, no matter who was the head coach for the past 20 plus years? Would Jerod Mayo be heralded as the next guy? This is super genius by the Krafts. The Patriots continue to zig when the league zags. Everybody in the league is hiring these young offensive minds. And man, the Patriots, they look at it a different way. And we love that about them. Would it be handled differently? Would it be thought about differently? Would people be looking at Jerod Mayo differently as a head coaching prospect if it wasn't for this one season, 2023? That's the first question I ask. Because I'm not going to get too deep into this today. I got into it yesterday. I don't believe in guilt by association. Why can't we look at Jerod Mayo and say maybe he learned from Belichick's mistakes? Maybe Jerod Mayo has been keeping his personal notebook. I'm going to take my notebook out right now if you're watching on YouTube. What if he's got his notebook? What if Mayo, you ever see Belichick? You've seen him 100,000 times, right, with that pencil in his ear, and he's got that little piece of paper. How much can you fit on the little piece of paper, by the way? But Belichick gets out that little tiny itsy-bitsy piece of paper, and he writes down something after a play. Not good. Blitz. Bad pick. He writes stuff down, right? What if Jerod Mayo has his own little pencil in the ear and his own little notebook, and he goes back to his office? He goes back to his house. He sits in the facility all alone at times, and he's writing things down. And what he's writing down is the mistakes that Belichick has made. Maybe Mayo looks at this and says, yeah, Bill screwed that up. Bill screwed that up. If I'm head coach, I would never do that. Meanwhile, Mayo could actually take the best from Belichick as well. There are certainly things that Mayo looks at, and we all look at, still to this day, that you can say, man, Belichick had that figured out. Belichick was so smart to do this. Belichick handled that situation the right way. Why do we always look at this as, well, Mayo and everybody else is just going to stink because, Matt Patricia stunk and the coaching tree stunk? I'll get to that in a little bit because I have more pushback on that idea as well with Mayo specifically. But when you look at this in the big picture, why can't Mayo learn from the mistakes? Maybe Mayo would look at this situation in 2023 and say, I went through that. I experienced it. I'm going to do the exact opposite of what we did because what we did obviously didn't work. We need to change things. So maybe Mayo would actually learn from Belichick's mistakes and some of the shortcomings, especially post-Brady. Jerod Mayo is also a very different personality than Bill. I kind of look at Matt Patricia and Josh McDaniels as molded by Bill Belichick, not only as a coach, but somewhat as a man, right? Both of those guys came in young. They weren't really looked at as the future of coaching. They learned under Belichick. They served the master well, and Belichick led them to their dream job. And everything that they thought was right about football came from Bill Belichick for the most part. Mayo's not that guy. Mayo's his own individual. Mayo was a top pick in the first round of the NFL draft. He comes with legitimate, incredible pedigree as a football player. And that is much, much different. He played the freaking game. Patricia, no. McDaniels, no. Talking NFL level, right? Brian Daboll, no. We can go through the list. Mayo actually played. He was his own man before he got here to New England. And obviously, he grew up and matured more here in New England, as we all do when we get through our 20s. But I don't look at this and say that Jerod Mayo is the exact same guy as Bill Belichick. And if you've listened to anybody that knows Mayo personally and has worked with him professionally, they will tell you Mayo is not Belichick. He's a different guy, different personality. He's also, this isn't ageism, but he's also much younger than Belichick. Belichick's in his 70s. Jerod Mayo's 34 years old. Don't you think that a 34-year-old former NFL player who played at a very, very high level, don't you think that guy has a much better chance of relating to the current NFL player than Belichick does? Don't you think that a 34-year-old former NFL player at a high level would have his own ideas, how to coach and how to lead and what needs to be done in 2023, 2024, 2027? There's a huge difference between being 34 years old and 71 years old. It doesn't mean you can't be effective at 71. But you handle things differently when you're 34 than 71. For most people, the vast majority of people. So we're talking about a major difference in age, a major difference in football experience, a major difference in personality. You can draw a stark contrast between Mayo and Belichick. Shoot, if you watch Mayo with the media, even right now, even this year, he's completely different. Personable, joking around, giving you insight, being super honest when he can be, when he's allowed to be, quote unquote. So just watching Mayo handle the media should tell you that he's a completely different guy than Belichick. So I don't believe in guilt by association. Now, I know many of you, while listening to this and watching me here on YouTube, don't forget to give that thumbs up, by the way. It takes a second of your time. Want your thoughts on Mayo as a possibility here. This is the first time we're weighing in on it. I know a lot of people will have the pushback of the young offensive mind. And I'm not telling you that the Patriots should not look into that. I'm not telling you that the Patriots shouldn't hire a young offensive guy. I'm just telling you that Mayo, for me, is not off the table. Mayo's in my top 5. He's absolutely in my top 5 as far as prospective head coaches to lead this organization next 7, 8, 9, hopefully 10 years. But for the offensive mind people, I understand. We talked about this within the last week or two, the idea of how the league is trending, the vast majority of hires are young offensive minds. First, is that a chicken or the egg? Are offensive minds the way to go because they always work out? Or is it just a copycat league? And Sean McVay worked out, and Kyle Shanahan worked out. Mike McDaniel has worked out. But there have been young offensive minds that have also flamed out. So is this just the trend? Are teams neglecting, ignoring defensive minds because it's not the sexy thing to do, because they're more concerned about selling their fan base? Legitimate question, right? How do we know some of these defensive minds that are younger guys would not have worked? How can you prove a negative? How in the world can you sit there and you could say, well, hey, offensive mind is the way to go because defensive minds never work out? Over the last few years, the vast majority of hires have been offensive minds. There's been a defensive mind hired, a young guy that's very similar to Mayo, played at a very high level in the NFL, is in his 30s, relates to the players much differently than some of the older cats do. That guy is D'Amico Ryans. How's he doing in Houston this year? And yes, he has CJ Stroud. I understand. But that goes hand in hand with this idea of developing players because you can relate to them, because you understand what their minds are thinking in certain times. Because, yeah, you're not a quarterback, but you've been on that field before. Maybe you've been friends with a quarterback before. Maybe you've been friends with multiple quarterbacks, and you know how they think better than anybody would that hadn't played the game. Even a coach who'd coached for 40 or 50 years. It's a different experience when you play in the NFL. D'Amico Ryans was brought to Houston. That's worked out very well. You drafted a quarterback at the top of the draft. You brought in a young former player, defensive-minded head coach. He brought in a young offensive mind in Slowick from his days in San Francisco, and that thing has been a beautiful experience so far for the Texans. So don't tell me it can't work. Right now, it's working. The most recent young defensive mind is working. So you could have that as some kind of evidence. Mike Vrabel, before they started to rebuild in Tennessee, when that roster went to hell, Vrabel was very successful his first 4 or 5 years as a head coach. Brought the Titans to an AFC championship game when the roster wasn't a top 7 or 8 roster in the game, was not a contending roster to a lot of people. They still got to the AFC championship game. Now, with all of this said, there would be conditions. I would not bring Mayo back here as the head coach and elevate him if there weren't some conditions to it. I don't want the band to be back together. I don't want everybody to return because I think that would be borderline ridiculous after what we've witnessed here this season. So here are some conditions. Matt Groh, got to go, right? If I'm bringing in a new head coach, then you bring in a new GM, that is a very easy decision to make. But I would want somebody who is a different evaluator than Groh. And I think Groh is too close to Belichick. Belichick has developed him as a front office guy. The grading evaluations would be very similar. The approach, I think, would be very similar. Now, maybe Matt Groh would come in and knock my socks off and be completely different. But if I'm elevating Mayo as a head coach, I want outside eyes as the GM. I want somebody that gets along with Mayo has a relationship with, but has an outside voice with a fresh set of eyes. I don't want Groh. I don't want Belichick in the front office if Mayo's the head coach. Offensively, people would say, well, Nick, how about Bill O'Brien? I think it depends on who the quarterback is. And hear me out. If Mac Jones, and I know nobody wants to think of this, but we have to look at all of the options. If you don't get a top pick, if you're not comfortable with any of the quarterbacks to draft them as the franchise guy, and you actually bring Mac back, even in a quarterback competition, then you want to actually keep consistency with this offensive system because you want to give Mac or that other quarterback that would, I would imagine, be very similar to Mac if it's a quarterback competition. You want those guys to have the best chance to succeed. And the best chance to succeed would be consistency. You don't want to throw Mac into another system. So it depends on who the quarterback is. If you bring in another quarterback, that's going to be the starter, and Mac's long gone. If you draft Caleb Williams, Drake May, Penix, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, McCarthy, any of those guys, if you draft one of those guys, then yeah, you bring in a young offensive mind or a mind that has worked with a scheme that, gels with those quarterbacks better. So that's to be determined. Defensively, look, Belichick's children have to move on. I don't think you can keep Belichick's kids around when Belichick is gone. No Belichick's allowed. Put the sign on the front door. I trust Kraft. I really do. Robert Kraft has hired 2 head coaches as the Patriots owner, Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick. Those are 2 of the best coaches in football over the past 2 decades. And I know they're not perfect. We can go back and forth, tit for tat. But Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick, there's a reason why those guys have had jobs for a long time at the NFL level. They're 2 of the most respected coaches in the league. Kraft hired both of them. Pete C was probably a little bit too young. They had to go in a different direction. But inevitably, Pete Carroll became one of the better head coaches in football. So I trust Robert Kraft. All right, one Patriot calls out the media. He did not hold back those comments coming up. Don't forget to hit that like button. Takes a second of your time. Just trickle on down the page. You see that thumbs up. Click on it. Takes a second. Helps us an awful lot. More eyeballs. Look, without growing this community, let's be honest, without growing this community, this show has little chance of lasting. The way this show is going to last is with support. And the like button, that thumbs up, helps an awful lot. Appreciate you. All right, so there were some questions about Trent Brown's absence in Germany. Ankle, question mark. Personal reasons, question mark. Well, Brown sat down with Mark Daniels of Mass Live, and he told Mass Live that the personal reasons was due to his uncle passing away. He also revealed he wasn't going to play against the Colts due to injuries. He says he has both high and low ankle sprains, and he's got an MCL injury that he's dealing with. After he didn't travel to Germany, Bert Breer said on the NBC Sports Boston's Patriots pregame live that Brown, quote, is habitually late to things. That's been a problem over the course of his career, and that problem hasn't gone away this year, unquote. Again, Daniels wrote that in Mass Live. Here was Trent Brown's response to what Bert Breer reported on NBC Sports Boston. Quote, that's bull bleep. It's a bunch of bull bleep. I'm never late. Honestly, I'm one of the first ones in and one of the last ones out of the building. Now, this line is special. If I am late to any meetings or anything, it's because I'm a grown man and I should be allowed to go to the bathroom. What? It's a lot of bull bleep. I'm a grown man. I should be allowed to go to the bathroom. It's a lot of bull bleep. I'm sure you're not really used to reporting about losing seasons around here, but that's the type of bull bleep rhetoric that comes to play. I don't think it's a coincidence that all season I've been the best player on offense, and then when I'm not playing, that BS starts happening. It's crazy. It seems like somewhat of a smear campaign, but whatever. I've literally been late, and I've literally never been late. Brown said that. He also noted that he hasn't been disciplined by Belichick while playing in New England. A lot to unpack here. First, I will tell you that Breer stood by his reporting on the early edition last night, NBC Sports Boston, stands by his sources, stands by his story, stands by the report. Breer, by the way, is not challenging Trent Brown about his injuries. He's not challenging Trent Brown on the personal reasons. So he's not out there questioning whether or not Trent Brown's family member passed away or Trent Brown has ankle injuries or an MCL. And Breer said he does know that Trent Brown is banged up. So that wasn't the question. Bert wasn't looking at Brown being out from Germany and saying, well, he's lying about injuries. He's lying about these personal reasons. Bert was just mentioning that Trent has been late a decent amount this year. And so a few things. It's tough to give Brown the benefit of the doubt because of his track record, right? He had issues in San Francisco. He comes to New England. He doesn't have an issue really in New England, But New England lets him walk with the contract. He goes to Oakland, gets paid a ton of money. He has issues in Oakland. So there is a track record here. He's one of the best offensive tackles in football. There's a reason why he's played on multiple teams. There's a reason why Oakland got rid of him after paying him a ton of money. So he doesn't have a squeaky clean track record. So the benefit of the doubt is tough to give to Trent Brown. There's a reason why he signs deals here in New England that are full of incentives, because the Patriots don't trust Trent Brown. They feel like they've got to keep him on the tracks, because if they don't motivate him with incentives, with more money, then he might go off the rails. So the Patriots' contractual status with Trent Brown, their handling of the player, tells you that he's not somebody that they fully trust is going to stay motivated and engaged throughout a season. So that should tell you an awful lot. The bathroom line, other than just being weird and funny, I do wonder if Trent's hunting for an excuse, right? He's telling us he's been late, but he's telling us, hey, yeah, I've been late, but I've been late because I'm a grown man. I got to go poop. Right? He's admitting he was late. It's like, yeah, I was late, but there's a reason for that. So there's an excuse built within here of his pushback. He's pushing back on this idea that he's been late, but he's also admitting he's been late because he said, well, you know, a man's got to go to the bathroom. A man has to go get work done to be healthier and all of that kind of stuff. Now, the strongest point that Brown made in his comments to Daniels is that he's never been disciplined by Belichick. And if that is the case, that tells you that Belichick has not been bothered to the point to discipline Brown. So if Brown's been late, it hasn't been bad enough for him to be disciplined officially by Bill. And I think that's a good point. I also think Trent Brown, whether you like him or don't, he has been one of the best offensive players for this team. Pro Football Focus has him graded out as the 8th best tackle in football. Yeah, he takes some plays off. There's some laziness from time to time. You're going to get that with him. But mostly, he's been pretty damn good for this team this year at left tackle when he's been healthy and he's been out there. And I would not be against a one-year deal with a bunch of incentives, even if it's to add some depth at tackle. I would not be against that. J.C. Jackson also spoke to the media, and man, there was a lot here. Jackson told Mass Live he missed multiple bed checks at the team hotel the night before the Washington game. Of course, that meant Jackson did not start against Washington. He didn't go to Germany. Jackson said, quote, "It was a punishment on my behalf, and that's what it was. I didn't take it any other way than this is punishment, and I hope you learn from it and grow from this mistake I made. I was kind of late to bed check." How are you kind of late to bed check? Is that like being kind of pregnant? Like you're either late to bed check or you're not. You're either pregnant or you're not. You're not kind of late, JC. You were late, bro. Just admit it. You were late. I was kind of late. He said he was late to bed check. Was it bed check or was it bed checks? Because Mass Live writes that he was late for multiple bed checks. Then at the beginning of this quote, Jackson says he was late to bed check. I don't know. Jackson says they checked my room. I wasn't there at the time. Nothing major. Well, JC, that would be in the eye of the beholder. Some people would say that no showing the team hotel the night before the game is pretty major. It's a pretty big deal. It's significant. He continues, I wasn't out that night doing anything stupid. I'm a professional. I know better than that. Are we talking about gradations of professionalism? Because again, when you no-show the team hotel the night before a game, that's not professional. I also think LA, the Chargers, would disagree vehemently that you are a professional with the story that came out a couple of weeks ago, that literally the GM had to stand up in front of the locker room and apologize for acquiring you via free agency because you were such a headache for that team. Continuing, I've never missed a bed check. Well, now you have. Maybe even multiple. Things happen. Things happen, you know? Have you ever told your boss that? Like you don't show up for work and you talk to the boss, you go, hey, look, things happen. What am I to say? Things happen. Might be. Things happen. No, missing bed checks don't just happen, JC. You make them happen. More JC. If I knew what that was going to cause, I would have never done it. Oh, boy. If I didn't get punished, I might have done this again. Translation. Man, I only regret this because I was punished for it. Hopefully that won't happen again. Hopefully. You have control over this, JC. What do you mean, hopefully it won't happen again? Hopefully you won't miss a bed check? How about you just don't miss the bed check? How about you get your ass to the hotel? It was all my fault. I made a mistake. Well, all right, good. I'm glad he said that. Reality check, I'm not bigger than the team. He needed to figure that out. Oh, boy. He did say the past year and a half, 2 years has been up and down for me mentally. I'm working, finding my peace, and got me a home now in Boston. Mentally, I'm doing better. And look, mental health is a serious thing. I've battled some things. I've had family members battle some things, so I won't take that lightly. Hopefully, JC is okay from a mental health standpoint. But I would say JC's track record well before the last 2 years would tell you that this isn't just a mental health situation. If he's saying, look, the last 2 years I haven't been great mentally. Well, you screwed up multiple times before the last couple of years. All right. Might have come up with a reason why Mac would start on Sunday. If he does start on Sunday, that isn't just it's the best chance of winning. But before we get to that reason, Cattle's on Causeway, live post-game podcast tonight following the Bucs game. Don't forget, while you're watching, to like, comment, and subscribe. The big game on Sunday against the Giants. What? It's a big game? Yes. Seth Walder from ESPN Sports Analytics posted this earlier today. Chance to earn a top 2 pick in the draft depending on Week 12 result. If the Patriots win on Sunday, they have a 9% chance of landing a top 2 pick. If the Patriots lose on Sunday, they have a 38% chance of landing a top 2 pick. Yeah, so this is important. And the quarterback decision is still unknown. Thought Andy Hart of EEI brought up a great point on X/Twitter. He brought up Bill Belichick in 2001 saying the following: I don't think you can really get 2 quarterbacks ready. I think you can get 1 ready. And that is what we have to do. We have to get 1 guy ready to play, and that is my responsibility to the football team. Again, that was Belichick in 2001. So what's going on now, Bill? You said in 2001 that you can't get 2 quarterbacks ready, but it certainly looks like you're trying to get 2 quarterbacks ready for this weekend's game. The inconsistencies, man, they're popping up all over the place. You know, the quarterback back and forth has me dizzy. But outside of the best shot to win, the best chance to win, I went back and thought about this last night. Why would it be Mac? Aside from just that. And I wonder, throwing a dart, and I'll have something else here that you want to stay tuned for. But here's a dart throw. Maybe this is the absolute last shot for Mac Jones as Patriots quarterback. Belichick, the team had a bye week. Mac had a bye week. Maybe Belichick looks at this and says that Mac is going to reset and refocus. And if he can't reset and refocus after a bye week, then he's never going to be able to the rest of this season. Mac has had 2 weeks to prepare for the opponent, which should put him in a very advantageous scenario on Sunday. The offensive line could be healthy. You could have Trent Brown, Cole Strange, David Andrews, Riley Reif, and Mike Owenu. You could have your actual legitimate starting 5 offensive line that you wanted at the beginning of this season out there on Sunday. Or maybe it's just the matchup. Maybe it's not, well, we're going to give Mac the last chance here. Maybe it's the matchup. I think this is critical. Defensively, the Giants aren't good. 28th in points per game, 28th in opponent yards per game, 30th in yards per play given up, 25th in red zone defense. You get the point. But Evan Lazar wrote about this at Patriots.com. The Giants, even though their numbers aren't good, they're not the easiest scheme matchup for the Patriots. Wink Martindale's there. He loves bringing pressure. Lazar writes Giants defense ranking only behind Brian Flores' Vikings defense in blitz rate. 42.4% of the time, the Giants blitz. They also run the 4th highest cover 0 rate in the league. And the Giants have been much better at getting pressure at the quarterback when they have sent an extra pass rusher. New York also plays the 2nd highest rate of man coverage in the league, almost 45%. They're aggressive. They play man. They get after the quarterback. Dexter Lawrence has been an absolute beast at defensive tackle. Lazar writes this, and this is what made the light go off. The key to any offensive success against this Giants defense is everyone understanding the plan against pressure to give the quarterback easy answers when Martindale turns up the heat. So maybe this is just Belichick trusting that Mac prepares better for this matchup and has a higher football IQ than Bailey Zappi does. I take you back to Mike Giardi, Boston Sports Journal. He wrote this earlier in the week. At no point during the spring or summer has Zappi or anyone else been able to do enough to prove they deserve a real opportunity. And as I wrote last week, the work Jones, special attention to this, the work Jones puts in during the week, the amount of film study has allowed him to maintain his grasp on the gig despite being pulled in 30% of the team's games. What stands out? The amount of film study, the work that Jones puts in. And Belichick is looking at a Giants defense that's very aggressive, that blitzes a ton, plays man coverage. And he might be looking at this and saying to himself, Zappi does not prepare well enough. He doesn't do enough film study. His football IQ is not as high as Mac's. And with this bye week, coming off this bye week, I want to give us the best chance to win. And Mac's preparation and Mac's IQ gives us the best chance to win because Zappi on the field hasn't distanced himself from Mac either. Just a thought. Happy Thanksgiving. Everybody have a great turkey day. Gobble, gobble. We plan on being back on Monday unless there's some breaking news. Don't forget, Cattle's on Causeway live postgame following the Celtics tonight.